Welcome back to Financial Clarity for Doctors. I'm Corey Janoff, joined per usual by Rachelle Vanderzanden.
Hello.
And we mentioned in passing in a previous episode something about increasing the surface area of your luck, essentially increasing the odds that good things will happen to you. And so we thought we'd dive into that a little bit more in an actual episode. And a few stories to kick us off. When I was in middle school or high school at a sports camp, I remember one of the speakers saying, "The harder I work, the luckier I get." And that quote stuck with me. And in sports, it's an easy analogy. The more you practice, the more reps you get in, the more you find yourself in the right place at the right time, and you're able to do more challenging things on the court or field or whatever the playing surface is for for your activity. And I think that extends into a lot of fields in life. But continuing with the sports analogy, we've got a good story here about a specific basketball game that Rachelle actually attended, which I'm jealous of.
So I think professional sports are really good examples of this, where people work very, very, very hard and there's a lot of repetition. And sometimes you're like, oh, lucky shot. But it's like, okay, they practice that all the time, not necessarily a lucky shot. And I think a very good example, Corey and I are Oregonians. So this is something that we remember very clearly and fondly because the Blazers are still our home team, even if they're not always great. But in 2019, they were pretty darn good. And in the NBA playoffs, in the first round, Damian Lillard of the Portland Trail Blazers no longer plays for us, but that's okay. But he hit a buzzer beater over the outstretched arm of Paul George to win the series over the Oklahoma City Thunder. I was there. I can tell you that it felt like we won the entire playoffs, like we were champions. It was amazing. There was so much screaming. And I remember sitting there before the shot went off and before they inbounded the balls. It was literally like a second and a half on the clock or something like that. And we were down by two. And I sat there and was watching it and thought he will, like, they'll get it in, they'll try to go for a two and tie it up, and then we'll be in OT. And
I thought it
that's
was
the
a
best
tie
case
game. That's why
scenario.
he was.
No,
We were
no, we were
down.
down by two.
Ah,
We were
interesting.
down by two. And so if they had inbounded it and scored the two, like we would have been tied, we would have gone into OT. And I was like, okay, best case scenario. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen.
So he
That's
was
what's
just
going to happen.
dribbling up top for like 10 seconds, holding the ball like by mid-court, waiting and waiting.
Yeah. Am I thinking of a different game?
I think you might be.
I'm thinking about the one with the Houston Rockets, I think. The second
Yeah,
round.
that one was a few years earlier where he hit a
Okay.
buzzer beater to end the series.
So my sports
Were
memory
you
is
at that one
terrible.
or were you at
That's
the
what I
Thunder
was
one?
at.
Okay, so you
And
were at
that's
the
another
Rockets.
example though. So who I
That
don't
one
know who
he
we were
he just
shotting
caught it,
over.
turned, shot it,
Yeah.
swish.
But again, it was like a 3-pointer where like he could have,
Yeah, that was
he
like
could have
a
gone to the
instant second.
inside and taken the easier shot, but he took the harder shot and he made it. And it was incredible. So a few years earlier, different game. Rochelle doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah, the one against the Thunder, he hit it over Paul George and did the wave. But he was
Okay.
just lulling him to sleep, and everyone's like, "What are you doing? You could get to the hoop. You got 10 seconds, and
You
he's just
got to do this. Yeah.
dragging it out, and then
Um,
sidesteps from like 40 feet and drains it."
right. So in that 2019 game, a lot of times we're like, lucky shot, whatever. Very low odds of going in. And after the Oklahoma City game that Corey is talking about, Paul George said that was a bad shot, implying that it was a bad decision for Dame to choose that shot. But in reality, he could have gotten closer to the basket, but it might look like a tough shot for him, but he makes those shots all the time. And that's what he said after the game. It was like, I might look like a tough shot, but I spent a lot of time practicing shots like that. He did it a few years earlier in another playoff series. He did it in this game. Like it wasn't an unusual thing for him because he increased his ability to make lucky shots by practicing them and making it less about luck and more about skill and practice and repetition and things like that. So, just another example of just a really kind of astonishingly good player in some ways who can make these longer shots and make it look just as easy as a layup.
Yeah, and I mean, to Paul George's credit, for most people, that is a terrible shot. Basically a 40-foot fadeaway over a 6'9" defender. Not happening. Like if you take anyone on the planet, the odds of that shot going in are slim to none. If you take a professional basketball player, I mean, maybe they have a 10% chance of making a shot like that. But yeah, definitely not a very good shot. But for certain individuals who have regularly practiced shots from that distance, like Dame and Steph Curry and more recently Caitlin Clark. I mean, she's got some range. They can make shots like that more often than most. They've increased their surface area of luck, the odds of the quote unquote lucky shot going their way and dropping through the hoop.
Yep.
So
And
it's
it's
like,
exciting to watch. I can tell you that.
yeah, it's like Tiger Woods in the early 2000s. I think there was a
The
stat at
putting.
some point where like he did not miss a putt inside 12 feet, like the entire season. And it's like, I mean, if I have a 12-foot putt, I might have a 10% chance of making it. But for someone who practices 24/7, yeah, they just make those putts routinely. And that's why he made millions of dollars and won a lot of golf tournaments.
Yep. I do think that increasing your surface area of luck is a good approach when we're thinking about finances as well. This can apply in bigger scenarios when we're talking about big companies and things like that. So companies rarely last more than a generation, like 20 or 30 years or so. And tough economic cycles could get the best of almost any company. But the companies that have the greatest odds of surviving adversity are ones that have little or no debt and a large amount of cash on hand. So Apple, Google, Microsoft, companies like that who are doing a good job of insulating themselves from bad luck, really, in those scenarios. As an individual, if you have little or no debt and a lot of cash or liquid assets, it's a lot easier to withstand unlucky circumstances. So, we're going to talk about a few different ways today that you can increase your surface area of luck. Lots of different things that we can think about.
Yeah, I think avoiding bad luck is arguably more important, if not at least as important as achieving good luck. I mean, the odds are none of us are winning the lottery. It's probably not happening. I mean, you get a lottery ticket, that would be truly lucky. Um, but the odds of some bad things happening to us in our lifetime are pretty darn high. And if we can withstand those bad things happening or avoid them, weather the storm, whatever, that'll help us get to where we want to be without it derailing us. So like, take for example, ask yourself, what are the odds of at least one of the following happening in your lifetime? Personal health issue, immediate family member health issue, death in the family, disability, lawsuit, job loss, divorce, natural disaster impacting your home or business or city, a house fire, a flood, wind damage, the stock market crashing, high inflation, increase in taxes, decrease in income, a serious car accident, a terrorist attack, governmental failure, a war, a pandemic. I mean, we literally just lived through COVID. I would argue the odds are at 100% of at least one of those happening to you. And odds are pretty high that more than one of those things will happen to you in your lifetime. So if
And
we
on that
know,
note,
yeah, not to depress us, but if we know something like this is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. We don't know exactly when, but we know it's probably going to happen. What are things that we can do to increase our chances of survival? If we have very little cash and are up to our eyeballs in debt, if something like that happens, it's completely going to crumble you. Like you're not going to be able to take on more debt because you've already maxed yourself out. You don't have any cash to survive whatever costs are associated with that. You're going to have to declare bankruptcy, sell your house, sell a kidney, whatever. Like, you gotta, it's going to be tough. So if we can, again, insulate ourselves, increase the odds that something like that isn't going to hurt us, and it'll also increase the odds that the good things will fall in our favor. So what are some things we can do to increase our luck surface area or
right.
decrease the bad luck surface area?
Exactly. And obviously, we can't completely eliminate luck or karma, or whatever the heck you want to call it. Like some things are going to happen and we can't necessarily control it. But I do think there's really simple things that we can do to just make our chances a little bit better. So one thing that Corey wrote down here was work hard and be kind. And I love that. Like if you're good at your job and you're liked by your peers and your staff and your patients, good things are more likely to happen to you. And like it's shown in studies that bedside manner and malpractice suits are correlated. If you have great bedside manner, you have a decreased risk of being sued or being the subject of a lawsuit. So I think that's really important to remember. Like kindness is so huge and can have big financial implications, especially in industries where you're patient facing, where that can be an issue potentially. I
And
think, yeah, go ahead, Corey.
I was gonna say, even if you're not patient facing, if maybe you're, I don't know, a radiologist or a pathologist or something, and you don't, but if you're, like you said, if you're kind to your peers, the support staff, the people you work with, they're more likely to go to bat for you, help you out when you need it, um, fill in for you, cover for you, etc. So working hard, being a team player, all that goes into it, and it makes for a good, a better work environment that'll make it more fulfilling for you and hopefully more successful for you as well.
Yep. I think living a healthy lifestyle is another good example of just a very broad thing that you can do that increases that lung surface area. So some of your biggest risks in life are health related, especially long term. And we're not going to avoid health problems forever. But if we can kind of decrease their prevalence in our lives, that will be helpful. So illness, disability, death. And there's lots of things that we can all do to take better care of ourselves, whether it's sleeping more or drinking less, you know. What
Eat
else
more
can we think?
vegetables,
Eat more vegetables, eat
exercise.
less ice cream, just take all the joy out of your life so you're healthy. Just kidding. But but I think that there's lots of ways that being healthy also makes you feel better. Your quality of life just increases as well. So there's definitely more than one purpose to doing things like that.
For sure. And I think the
Yeah.
health one, and it's tough. Like if you live the perfect lifestyle according to the internet, I mean, you need 100 hours a day to do all the things. Like you get 9 hours of sleep, wake up, journal in your gratitude book, and then meditate for 10 minutes, and then take a walk in nature, and then make yourself a
Garden.
healthy breakfast. And then, okay, if you have kids, trying to get them off to school, get to work for 12 hours, get to your kids' soccer practice. Like, okay, where's the exercise? Where's the meditation? Where's sitting in a sauna and then doing a cold plunge? Like, where's the I get it. There's not enough time in the day to do all the things that you need or want to do, but every little thing that you can do,
Hmm.
walk instead of sit around. If you're, watching TV, get like a walking treadmill and do that, or do push-ups and sit-ups while you're doing that. Opt for the healthier choices at the grocery store. Like I think Rachelle, you mentioned in one of our last episodes, you got, hummus and vegetables and, ready to go for even just a snack or for a meal if you don't have a meal prepared. So little things, no one's perfect. We're not going to be perfect, but the more you can do to keep the illnesses at bay and keep you on your feet, and hopefully the medical visits and medical bills at a minimum, yeah, that'll increase your chance of having longevity and a happy lifestyle.
Yep. You all know this, you're doctors. And back to our area of expertise. So what about debt? So the more debt you have, the smaller your margin for error is. If you get any sort of bad luck, like you might be in a really rough spot. It's harder to weather like the storms financially. Like you can't, like if your income drops, you're in trouble. You can't pay all your bills anymore. Like if you lose your job, even worse. If there's a lawsuit, even worse. If there's a health issue, also terrible. So, in general, when we're thinking about debt, we want to minimize any short term debt as much as possible. So, that's like credit cards and things like that. If you're spending money on credit cards, awesome. We're getting points, we're getting rewards, but I like pay them off every single month. And I think that should be a good strategy for anyone listening to this podcast. If you already have credit card debt, we got to kind of find a way to tackle it and bring it down so that we're just not in that spot anymore. So any extra money you can have to put towards that debt is a great idea. And then also when we're thinking about taking on debt, which can be a very good tool, like ideally we're taking on less debt than you can afford. Lenders, like mortgage lenders especially, will sometimes approve you to take on debt payments that equate to almost 40% of your income, or even more in some cases. Is that a good idea? Absolutely not. They do not care if you can do anything fun or save any money. All they care is that you can make that one debt payment. And if they're giving you a loan that's like that high of your income, it's likely that you're also paying probably a higher interest rate because they're taking on a little bit more risk too. So it becomes even more expensive in your life. So ideally, we can keep your debt to income ratio low. It's a function of like what your monthly payment obligations are, not necessarily like the total principal balance. So sometimes when we're thinking about student loans, like that can be a huge debt burden, but maybe the payments are lower because we're on an income driven plan and we're planning to get rid of them. So that can be minimized a little bit in terms of what the impact is to your overall financial health. So ideally, we just keep that payment ratio as a percentage of your income fairly low so that you have wiggle room when things don't go according to plan. It will also help your credit score be better if you're not borrowing like up to your eyeballs. And it'll make it easier to borrow money at favorable terms if and when you need to or when you want to. You know, if you need to buy a new car, like you're going to do that more easily if you don't already have a ton of debt.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, that debt thing, and we find ways to justify it if it's something that we want. Um, but just getting back to the odds of success, if you don't have any debt and your income and your fixed monthly payments are low and your income drops, okay, well, we'll survive. But if we have a high mortgage, high car payments, student loan payments, the list goes on of the debts that you potentially could take out. If we're basically living paycheck to paycheck, then our income drops. That's going to be a problem, and we got to make some changes. So, that's again, we aren't arguing that you shouldn't have any debt. Obviously, we alluded to those big companies early that essentially have very little debt and large cash, and yeah, they can do whatever they want pretty much because they're in a great financial position, and the same applies to you. But debt is a useful tool to help accomplish your financial goals. We just need to be prudent in how we use it. Um, on the other end of that spectrum, the cash or emergency reserve component. So not only keeping our debts reasonable, but our cash balances, I don't know if high is the right word or large, but yeah, sufficient. So
Mhm.
we've talked before, and it's pretty common financial knowledge. You should probably have an emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of expenses is a pretty standard recommendation. So if you're spending 10 grand a month to pay all your bills and everything, you should have between 30 and 60,000 for an emergency fund. I'm a little more flexible there. I mean, yes, I'd recommend that, but also just whatever makes you sleep well at night. So if you have 10,000 a month of expenses, but you really want to keep 100,000 for emergencies, great, keep 100,000. That's fine by me, even if it's 10 months of expenses. The more the merrier for insulating yourself. But we don't want to sacrifice our long-term goals by hoarding cash, because then it might make achieving retirement more challenging. So it's a balancing act. But the more cash you have, if you have those unexpected events happen, you're better prepared to withstand them. Vet bills, car repairs, you're laid off from your job, or you have to move, or fly to a funeral. Um, whatever, the list goes on, you'll be in a much better position to withstand that. You get temporarily disabled, you're out of work for a little while, you're not going to get paid while you're waiting for your disability insurance to kick in. And even then, the disability insurance might not cover 100% of your after-tax earnings. So there's an endless stream of scenarios where having a lot of cash will benefit you. And yeah, a lot of those things, those aforementioned risks are attributed to luck, but having that slush fund of cash available helps you have better luck by being able to withstand those bad events and not having it impact you financially in a negative fashion. Simple as that. Can you survive the bumps and bruises and the little storms that are bound to happen along the way? And cash will allow you to do that.
Yep. I think a savings rate is another really good example of let's build in some buffer here. So if the goal is to retire at 60 and it seems like saving 20% of your gross income will get you there, like maybe do a little more, build in some buffer. I think this is especially true if you're using online calculators and things like that to kind of determine your retirement readiness and your retirement path, because those usually use like average returns and things like that. And we don't know that that's what we're going to get. So, like, if we're kind of betting on the middle, we may be out of luck. So, let's build in some buffer so that that's not necessarily happening. You can also be really conservative when you're doing your own estimates, or if you're doing retirement projections, if you're walking through them with a financial advisor, like we do that here. But, like, for one example, we know that it's very likely that we'll have some Social Security income in retirement, but we don't really know what that will look like, especially for younger generations. Um, if we don't count on it when we're doing those retirement projections, like we're in a much more secure position. We're like kind of building in an extra buffer, which is whatever income we do end up getting from Social Security. It's just like a little cherry on top. It's a bonus at that point. So there's other examples too. Like you may get matching contributions from your employer at work into your retirement plan. When we do projections, just showing like how much you're saving every year, we don't usually use those because we don't want to assume that you're going to get that every year for the next 20 or 30 years until you retirement because or until you retire because that can change over time. During COVID, there were lots of employers that paused employer contributions, and how those contributions look has changed a lot over the last few decades. There were lots of employers that provided pensions and things like that previously and don't anymore. Now we have maybe fairly standard contributions into 401ks, but they can vary quite a bit. With one employer, you can get 9%, and with another employer, you can get 2%. So we don't necessarily want to assume that we're going to get a certain amount from your employer every year.
And odds are you're going to change employers multiple times throughout your
Yep.
career. It's rare nowadays that people stay at the same job for 30 years in all fields, but medicine isn't immune to that either. So things change, things evolve. There's better opportunities potentially down the road, or the current setting might change for the worse for you and your objectives, goals, whatever. Um, so yeah, we don't want to rely on our employer to take care of us from a retirement perspective. But yeah, we've talked before about how your savings rate is arguably the most important factor in achieving your financial objectives. If you're able to save a large percentage of your income, the the more you save, the sooner you can reach your goals. You don't need a financial advisor to figure that one out. If you're saving a large percentage of your income, you'll be able to retire sooner. If you're saving a large amount for your kids' college, you're more likely to be able to pay for the schools that they get into at the level that you want to pay for. And if you're saving a large amount and you're arguably ahead of schedule on achieving your financial goals, going back to Rachelle's example, if you want to retire at 60, but at the savings rate you're on, you're in a position to potentially be financially independent by age 50, and something bad happens to you along the way to where you now can't save as much, well, we might still be good at being able to retire by 60, even if we have to decrease our savings rate a little bit. And having that wiggle room to be able to bob and weave and adjust and still be able to achieve our goals in the time frame we want to is beneficial.
Yep. I have lots of clients who kind of hit the ground running, when they start as attendings, knowing that their personal circumstances could change. Like right now, they don't have a lot of financial obligations. Maybe they don't even have a house, they don't have kids or a spouse, and they are planning to do that at some point. So they save a lot up front and then start to take on those obligations. And, maybe their savings rate starts to go down a little bit. But if we've like totally front loaded those retirement plans, that can be huge. That can be really, really, really powerful with long-term savings and like how that grows over time.
Let's see. Next one on the list, diversify. So be diversified, diversify everything. Rachelle wrote, have at least two kids. So if you screw up on the first one, you have another one that can take care of you in old age. Just kidding.
Just kidding.
Um, but, uh, but, um, but yeah, diversify your investments. We've talked about that plenty of times before. Invest in different things, invest in different types of accounts, not, invest in beyond your work retirement plan, but other accounts like Roth IRAs, taxable accounts, etc. Things that are taxed differently. So if tax rates change over time, you can be prepared and have accounts that are treated more favorably than others in evolving environments because we have no idea what taxes are going to look like in the future. They change and evolve over time. Buying individual stocks can be fun if you're into it, but it's also statistically not likely to be successful for you. Just the odds are not in your favor. So spread it around, invest in a bunch of different things. Ideally, you're investing in not only different companies, but different asset classes in general, like US companies versus international companies, large companies versus small companies, bonds. There's a wide array within the bond space, short term, long term, government, corporate, municipal, asset backed, etc. The list goes on, but spread that risk around, invest in a little bit of everything with modern investing platforms nowadays. It makes it really easy with very little money to be well diversified at a low cost with index funds and ETFs and whatnot. So it's not hard to be well diversified with your investments. And the reason we want to be diversified is because we don't know what area is going to do well in the short term or over the long term. I mean, we have a good idea what, that certain types of asset classes might do better than others over the long run, but we don't really know specifically which segments of those asset classes, like, all right, US stocks, international stocks, stocks in general are likely going to do better than bonds in general, just because the risk associated with them is higher. So investors are going to demand higher returns on their stocks than they are on their bonds. But it's not going to be the case every single year over the long run. Hopefully, that's the case. But within the stock space specifically, we don't know which areas are going to do well. Is it going to be healthcare stocks? Is it going to be tech stocks? Is it going to be pharmaceutical companies? Is it going to be real estate? Nobody knows. So investing in a little bit of everything will allow you to always own the best performing area every single year and never be overly exposed to the worst performing area every single year. And a little secret of investing, maybe not so secret, but you don't need the best returns over time in order to achieve your goals. You just need mediocre returns repeated year in and year out, consistently over time. And maybe that's a bad way to put it because your returns aren't going to be linear. One year you're going to be up 20%, next year you'll be down 15%, another year it might be plus 18, another year plus 15, another year minus 6. Like it's going to be a roller coaster ride. But over the long run, if we can just be okay with our average rate of return, then you'll do just fine. It all gets back to that savings rate component, where if you aren't saving a healthy amount and you need outsized returns in order to achieve your goals, now your luck surface area has shrunk and your margin for error is a lot narrower, and you need to get a lot luckier in order to hit those goals. So
Yeah.
if your savings rate, the amount you're saving says, yeah, if you just average 5% over the next 25 years, you'll be just fine. Versus if you have a smaller savings rate and you need 12% over the next 20 years or so to reach your goals, that's going to be a lot higher hurdle to clear and a lot more
Yeah.
challenging to actually achieve.
Absolutely. I think most of this boils down to living below your means. It's spending less, taking on less debt, saving more and leaving yourself some wiggle room. I do think that if you're going to narrow it down, focus on the big things, not so much the small things. So, your house, your car, international travel, those things are going to matter a ton more than your morning latte or your Netflix subscription or whatever it is. There's like small fish and there's big fish. So if you can minimize your large fixed expenses, that is going to have a much bigger impact on how much wiggle room you have to take on less debt and save more money. So I think always, let's buy less house than you can afford, a less expensive car than you can afford, because what you can afford is probably quite a bit, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily need to be spending that kind of money on those things. And once you take on those larger payments, it's not like you can get rid of them overnight. If we now have a mortgage obligation that's kind of outsized and has made it so that most of our money is going towards our mortgage, you can't get rid of that. You could sell it, but you're probably going to lose money on that transaction. And it's just not an easy thing to fix once it has happened.
For sure. Yeah, keeping your fixed expenses, the big ones, to a minimum will allow you to splurge on the morning latte and not feel dirty about it. And yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
little things, they don't move the needle. Like for a number of years, we were using my brother's Netflix account, and Netflix, as many of you have learned, has been cracking down on the password sharing. It literally got to the point where they like would, ask for the code and it would go to my brother's phone and he'd have to text it to me. But then they were like asking for me to take a photo of my TV at home, like on my home Wi-Fi network. I'm like, all right, this is
Oh
getting,
my
I'm just
goodness,
gonna
that's
spend
intense.
the $20 a month for Netflix.
And it's not going to break you.
I'll be
Yeah.
okay. I will be okay. But yeah, I'm not a car person. I've talked about before. I've got maybe a few months left of a $400 a month car payment, and then we will have no car payments at all. And our cars, we don't have long commutes. Working from home makes it easy to get to the office. So like our cars will last forever if we want them to. So that's a huge expense, right? I know a number of people who are spending 2 grand a month or more in car payments just because cars are expensive and they drive nicer cars. And it's, I mean, that's a mortgage for a lot of people. So and that could go a long ways to retirement savings. Like if you took 2 grand a month and put it into investments versus on cars, no judgment here, but I'm just saying, like, we're talking millions of dollars that could compound over the course of a 30-year span. Um, so it's the big things that matter a lot more than the morning latte or the streaming service subscription. Although with all
Yep.
these streaming services now, like I was just looking, the kind of side tangent here, the NFL just announced they're going to put 2 games on Christmas on Netflix. They're going to have a few games on Peacock exclusively. Amazon's obviously in the game. YouTube TV has the Sunday ticket package. Like, if you're a football fan, you got to have a bunch of different packages. Luckily, most of these streaming services you can just cancel after a month. I think all of them, actually. I don't think there's any long-term commitments, but it's just annoying. It's like, all right, I'm going to sign up for Peacock for opening week so I can watch my Eagles play in Brazil and then cancel it the day after. I have Netflix. I'll be good to go there. Um,
This
but
is how Corey's brain works when he's thinking
well, and then
about
Comcast, I guess there's
that.
reports that Netflix and Apple TV Plus and Peacock, I think, are going to do a joint streaming package available on Comcast's platform because Comcast, NBC Universal owns Peacock. Um, so that'll be, I mean, it's all routing back to cable. If you have Comcast, then you'll have all these streaming
They're
services as part of
consolidating.
your cable bundle again.
Yeah. Oh
And
my
then
goodness.
ESPN and that, like they're doing like Disney, Hulu, is it
National
Paramount and Fox
Geographic.
is coming out with, they're basically coming together to create like a sports streaming service essentially.
So
So
if you want
it's,
the down low on all the streaming, talk to Corey about it. He's
yeah, I
got
don't
the
know if I'm the
details.
expert. I just get a few tweets here and there on my group texts,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
again, if you're spending $100 a month on all these streaming packages, for most doctors, that's not gonna impact things at all. But if you're spending 2 grand a month in car payments, or 10 grand a month on a mortgage, or 30 grand a year on vacations, like that adds up.
Hmm.
And if you can afford it, fantastic. By all means, if you're saving enough to reach your goals, you're putting enough away to send your kids to college, if that's a priority for you, you're on track to retire when you want to, and you want to do all those other things, then yes, high fives all around. It's if we're choosing to do those other things, getting back to the needs versus wants episode from a couple episodes back. If it's impacting our financial well-being and decreasing our luck surface area, that's where we can potentially run into trouble.
Yep. I think just in summary, it's like the harder you work, the luckier you get, especially if that hard work includes being smart about your money. And if you're trying, like avoiding or withstanding bad luck is arguably more important than receiving good luck. We kind of want to just eliminate the impact that bad luck can have on us. There's all sorts of little tropes, like, a penny saved is a penny earned, all those kinds of things. So try to structure your life so you can feasibly accomplish what might appear challenging to most people. And we completely understand that this is easier said than done a lot of the time, especially depending on your income. Like income for physicians varies dramatically. And if you make 200 grand and you live in the Bay Area, that's way different than if you make 200 grand and you live in North Dakota, or if you make 400 grand. There's a lot of variation in what is affordable for people. And we've talked about this lots before, but focus in on the things that are most important to you in terms of your financial goals and kind of disregard the stuff that doesn't matter. Let's try to not spend money on crap that doesn't make us happy, if you know what I'm saying. I think we all get sucked into that sometimes. But with a little discipline and prioritizing your financing, it usually means that you can keep your lifestyle within your means. And you should be able to achieve your financial objectives if you can do that and kind of withstand any bumps and bruises along the way that come along with that bad luck.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses. If the Joneses aren't living the lifestyle you want to live, then why try to keep pace with them?
Mm-hmm.
So, another fun episode. Good luck increasing your luck, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening.